Aló.
Perfecto. Bueno, nos vamos ubicando. Juan Carlos.
Más al lado. Vamos al discurso. Eso. Pasaba como entonación, melodía. Perfecto.
Bueno, a todos muy buenos días.
Good
Gusto
morning.
saludarlos
It's a
en
pleasure
este panel número
to
1.
reach you and welcome you to panel
Felicitar
number 1.
nuevamente a los organizadores, en particular a Bancoldex,
We want to
aquí
thank the
Javier
organizers,
Díaz, por este
especially
evento.
Bancoldex,
Es un honor que
for putting together
esté
this event.
aquí
It's an honor
en Colombia.
to be here.
Mi nombre es Ramiro López Guío,
That you're all
soy el
here. My name
representante
is
del Banco
Ramiro López
Interamericano de
Guío.
Desarrollo
I represent
en Colombia,
IDB in
uno de los
Colombia.
coorganizadores de
One
este
of the
evento,
organizers of this
y es
event.
realmente muy grato para mí estar
It is a
aquí
pleasure for
en
me to be
Cartagena.
here in
En
Cartagena.
este primer panel
This first
se llama
panel
De Colombia para el
is
Mundo.
called From Colombia
Acá hay muchos
to the
colombianos,
World.
no como en Cartagena, de Colombia para el mundo. La nueva visión de la banca pública de
It will
desarrollo.
give a
Y
perspective
permítanme
of
presentarles a
development
Diego
banks.
Alejandro Guevara,
Let me
quien
introduce to
dará
you
una
Diego
presentación
Guevara, who will
para
talk
introducir
to
el tema
you to
y iniciar
introduce
así
the
este
topic
taller.
and thus begin with this
Diego Alejandro Guevara se
conversation.
desempeña
Diego
actualmente como
Guevara is
viceministro
presently
general del
Vice
Ministerio de Hacienda y
Minister at
Crédito
the Ministry
Público
of
aquí en
Finance
Colombia.
and Public Credit
El
here in
doctor Guevara es un
Colombia.
profesional con una
He's a
profunda
professional
experiencia en
with
finanzas
vast
públicas,
experience
macroeconomía
in
y política industrial,
macroeconomics,
con un fuerte
with a
compromiso
strong
para abordar los
commitment
desafíos
to
de desarrollo
addressing
y
development
retos socioeconómicos del
challenges
país.
and socioeconomic
Ha
issues
realizado
of the
importantes
country.
contribuciones a lo largo de su carrera
He's made important
y su experiencia
contributions
laboral
throughout his
se
career,
ha
and
destacado
his
como profesor
work
asociado e investigador en la
includes being a
Universidad Nacional de
researcher,
Colombia,
college
la
professor
Fundación Escuela para el Desarrollo,
at the
Universidad
Fundación
Sabana,
Escuela de
la Universidad
Desarrollo
Javeriana y la
Javeriana
Universidad
Savannah
Católica.
Universities, as well
Ha
as
sido
Católica
consultor de la Agencia
Universities.
Francesa de
He's been a
Desarrollo, otro de los
consultant
coorganizadores de este importante evento, en
for
temas de
one of
macroeconomía y cambio
the
climático,
organizing
y también ha
agencies of
sido
this
profesor
event,
visitante
and
en
he's also
Frankfurt,
been a
Alemania.
lecturer in
Entonces,
Frankfurt,
dejamos con Diego,
Germany.
que va a hacer una presentación.
We
Por favor,
understand you have
adelante,
a
Diego. Muchas
presentation
gracias.
for us. We would like to give you the floor.
Muy buenos días.
Good morning.
Bienvenidos a
And
este evento de
welcome to
Finance and
this
Commons, a todo el panel, a
Finance
todos
and
los
Commons Summit,
presidentes
all
de
the
las
panel
entidades que
members,
hacen parte
all the
del
presidents
grupo Bicentenario, que es nuestro
of
grupo
the
desde el Ministerio de
Bicentenario
Hacienda,
Group or
y un saludo a
Bicentennial
Ramiro
Group
por la
agencies.
moderación,
Thank
a
you,
Ángela,
Ramiro, for
Francisco,
moderating,
a
Angela,
Hernando,
Francisco,
al doctor Juan Carlos y a
Fernando,
Javier por
Juan Carlos
todo el
and
liderazgo en
Javier
este evento.
for your
Bueno,
leadership
simplemente
in all
para
of this.
poner en
Just to
contexto
give
y
you some
que sea la
context,
apertura de este
and for
panel,
this to be
yo les
the
quiero
opening
contar a
of
ustedes
this
un poco una
panel,
iniciativa
let me tell you a
que
little
ha
bit
estado
about an
presente en
initiative
el Estado
in
colombiano,
which the Colombian
quizás un
state
proceso
has
de 10 años para
participated.
llegar
It's
a
been
lo
a
que hoy
10-year
conocemos
process to
como
reach what
el
we
Grupo
call today
Bicentenario.
the Grupo
Nosotros
Bicentenario or
queremos que este
Bicentennial
Grupo
Group.
Bicentenario, que fue
We
creado
want
como
for
grupo en el
this group,
gobierno
which was
anterior,
created
pero que
as a
ya
group
tenía
in the
un
previous
trabajo previo, como les
administration
vamos a mostrar en un
and
momento,
had
desde la
already done
creación
some
de
previous
la Dirección
work,
de
which I will
Participaciones
show
Estatales en
you
2015,
shortly.
con un
Since
objetivo concreto
2015, with a
de
specific
integrar
objective of
y tener una sinergia
integrating
muy
and having a
fuerte entre
strong
las diferentes
synergy
entidades
between the
financieras
different financial
públicas. Un
public
poco cuando
entities.
nosotros vemos
When
en detalle
we look
estas
in
líneas
detail
de tiempo,
at these
de cómo se llega
timelines
hoy a lo que es el
as to
Grupo
how we
Bicentenario,
reached what
pues
the Grupo
realmente en el
Bicentenario is
2012 hubo
today.
una
Well, in
consultoría con el
2012
BID
there was a
para tratar de
consultancy with
entender mucho mejor
IDB to
cómo
try to
tener
better
una
understand
gestión mucho más
how to
eficiente y
have a more
productiva
efficient,
de los
productive
activos del país.
work or
Y en esta
management
línea,
of
cuando
the
se
country's
empieza a gestionar
assets.
la entrada de
And
Colombia
when
a la
entry of
OCDE, que
Colombia
creo que es uno de los hitos,
into
digamos, también bien
OECD
importantes
was
hacia
studied,
2013,
something
pues
that was very important in
fruto como de estos dos
2013.
escenarios, se crea en el
Well,
Ministerio de
at the
Hacienda y
Ministry
Crédito
of
Público en el
Finance
año
and Public
2015
Credit in
la Dirección
2015
General
was
de
created
Participaciones
the
Estatales,
State
con un
Participation
objetivo de
Directorate,
tener como un
which
control y
purpose
una
was to have
sinergia de los
control and
diferentes
synergy
bancos
of the
públicos,
different
bancos
public banks,
territoriales y fondos de
territorial
garantías
banks,
que
and
nosotros
guarantee funds
tenemos.
that we
Desde
have
2017 se hacen estas recomendaciones para la constitución del
in
holding
2017, this
financiero
recommendation
y en
was
el
made to have a
2019
financial
se crea el Grupo
holdings,
Bicentenario.
and the Grupo
Y con la
Bicentenario then
llegada
was
del nuevo
created
gobierno, pues
subsequently. With the
nosotros
arrival of the
decidimos
new administration,
trabajar con la llegada del
we
exministro
decided
Campo y
to
ahora con
work with
el
former Minister
ministro Bonilla
Ocampo and now
en
Minister
seguir dándole
Bonilla
continuidad a la
and
creación y al
continue with the
fortalecimiento
creation
del
and
Grupo
strengthening of
Bicentenario.
the
De hecho, en el
Grupo
plan de desarrollo
Bicentenario. In fact, in
de
the
este año, en el plan de
development
desarrollo de
plan,
Colombia, potencia
Colombia's
mundial de la
plan,
vida, hay unos artículos que nos dan una
some articles
flexibilidad
are
para
included that give us
buscar un
flexibility
mejor
in order
desempeño y
to
algunas
seek better
flexibilidades
performance
y
and
homogenizaciones
to
en la constitución de lo que es el
homogenize
Grupo
the
Bicentenario.
constitution
Y
of
por eso
the
hoy por hoy
Grupo
estamos en esa
Bicentenario. And
implementación.
today we are
Nosotros
in
aspiramos
that
a que
implementation.
al
We
finalizar este
expect
gobierno ya
that
pueda
at
haber
the end of
un
this
presidente
administration,
de alto
there can
perfil.
be a high
Hemos
profile
empezado a hacer la búsqueda de un
president of the
presidente de
group.
alto
We are
perfil
searching
para el
for this
Grupo
person, a
Bicentenario.
president
Y
for the
cuando yo les hablo a
Grupo
ustedes de Grupo
Bicentenario.
Bicentenario, para ponerlo en contexto,
And
ahora cada uno de los
Grupo
presidentes que
Bicentenario,
está
each
acá
of the presidents
presente va
that
a
are
tener unos
here
minutos
present
para
are going to
explicar
have
su
a
rol
few minutes
como
to
Banco
explain
Público
their
de
role
Desarrollo,
as public
pero bajo este gran
development bank.
paraguas que nosotros
But under
entendemos
this
como el
big
holding,
umbrella that
tenemos
we understand
al
as a
Banco Agrario con
holding, we
unos
have
liderazgos
Banco
específicos en el
Agrario with
pequeño
specific
productor,
leadership
a la
in
financiera de
this
desarrollo
small
nacional como
producers,
ese eje de
the
grandes proyectos
FDN,
de
National
infraestructura, a
Development
Bancoldex como
Financing
un banco de
Agency,
comercio
Bancoldex
exterior, pero
as
que
a
también
foreign
queremos
trade
que
bank,
llegue
but we
a
also
muchos otros
wanted to
sectores, a
reach
nuestra
many other
financiera de
sectors.
desarrollo territorial
Our
que
territorial
estructura y
development
ejecuta muchos proyectos a lo
bank,
largo y ancho
Findeter.
de Colombia, el trabajo que hace Ángela en
The
Finagro
work
y bueno,
also
otras
done
entidades
by
que no están acá, sus
Finagro and other
presidentes, pero pues
entities
un
whose
fondo de
presidents are not
garantías y
here,
nuestras
but we have
aseguradoras
Fondo de
como Previsora
Garantías and
Positiva
insurers like
eh,
Previsora
y
and
Fiducoldex.
Positiva, and Fidu Coltex and Fidu Agraria. And there's three companies that are in the process of studying their entry into this group. So the idea of creating this Grupo Bicentenario, the goal and the purpose is for it to be one of the largest finance groups in the country, adding up all these assets and having correct management of them by creating a value to have a solid group for the country. A purpose is to provide solid financial solutions that are modern, efficient, and can also be adapted to the purposes of the governments as well as the purposes for or the goals for development, and including strong sustainability. And here, our idea is to lead social sustainability, environmental sustainability, as well as external sustainability in terms of the balance, payment balance. At each of the entities this year, we've tried to strengthen corporate governance practices. I think that the general State Participations Directorate has worked very hard to improve the corporate governance codes, heeding recommendations by OECD, and to try to have better management and internal control practices, and also in terms of risk management and the different types of procedures and manuals that are required and necessary. And just to close and give the floor to each of the panelists, I do believe there are some general frameworks that allow us to guarantee good governance models. And this starts from the idea that public banks can also be efficient. After several decades where one always thought that public banking, public development banking had become outdated. I think the last decade and the challenges of climate change and flexible financing are going to be a new force for public development banking. And this implies having good governance in terms of a structure and a control agency where there's a board of directors that answers to us as majority shareholders, which namely the Ministry of Finance. I think that with this message, then, this introductory message, then, you can have an idea of what Grupo Bicentenario is as a large financial holding that includes public entities and which are in contact with the different multilateral companies who are also present here. There's always good relation with IDB, CAF, and different public banks in the different sectors. So this was like an introduction of what Grupo Bicentenario is, and that we hope that it becomes a very strong or one of the strongest financial groups of the country, aligned with the objectives of our development plan. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Diego, for the introduction. I'm also going to, for introducing as well the Grupo Bicentenario, a holding that's truly relevant, which is a structure for coordination amongst banks, which have a very specific mission in Colombia that I think will help the country, the country's development and the financing of the private sector, the public sector at different levels. In a world with financial paradigms are constantly evolving, these public banks are vital agents of change, modeling the paths of nations towards sustainable growth and equitable distribution of income. The panel is called From Colombia to the World, and we have the opportunity to hear from actors that are going to help us understand the different strategies their institutions manage to promote financial inclusion, to drive innovation, improve green financing and sustainable infrastructure. For this, Colombia has created this group, Grupo Bicentenario, which brings together 5 large financial institutions under one corporate umbrella. The presidents of these 5 banks in this holding will tell us about challenges and the implementation of the new strategy for public development banking. So we have the privilege of having these representatives here. It is very difficult to find them all together in a single panel, so it's a very good opportunity we have today, and I'm very thankful. It's also an honor for me to be here being the moderator of this panel. We're going to talk about the Sustainable Development Goals and how this Grupo Bicentenario and the vision of each of these banks can contribute to this end. So we're going to begin this session without further ado, and I'm going to start by asking each of the panelists, Javier Diaz, presently president of Bancoldex, which is the Business Development Bank of Colombia. He has a master's from Tufts University in the U.S., vast experience in Latin America. He's worked in the United States, in Europe, and in Latin America. He's also been VP at Grupo Aval, and he was founder and director of Los Andes Capital. He's worked in Washington, D.C. and New York in legal positions. He also was a star staff member at IDB. Yes, star. Well, he doesn't say that, but I do have to say it. He was an outstanding young professional at IDB. Francisco Lozano is presently the president of IFM. He specializes in project structuring. He is a civil engineer from Los Andes University and has 3 master's degrees. 3, not 1, but 3. 1 from the London School of Economics and 2 from MIT. He has experience in the public and the private sector. He was a partner at Ashmore, VP in investment portfolio and VP of investments at Financiera Colombiana. He's also worked at the planning department. Thank you, Francisco, for being here and for your participation. Ángela María Penagos. She is the president of FINAGRO, a public fund for developing the agricultural sector in Colombia. She has a degree in economics from Del Valle University and a master's in economics, and also one from the University of Maryland. She also worked as representative for the Center of Research in Food at the Rural Development of Latin America Center. She also worked at the National Planning Department, including being the Director of Rural Sustainable Development and Assistant Director of Development. Thank you very much for participating. Juan Carlos Muñiz is the President of Bancoldex. Correction of the speaker, Findeter. I apologize, Javier. Yes, yes, no, it's not me. Well, he's the new president. Juan Carlos, thank you very much for being here. He's the president of Findeter. He was formerly the economic secretary for development at Barranquilla, director of finance. He worked at Telefónica. He has also been a college professor at Politécnico de la Costa Atlanta. He's a business administrator from Simón Bolívar University and Politécnico at Costa Atlántica. I also have here, he has a master in business from CEA and the Villanueva Center at Universidad de Madrid. Carlos Chica, Hernando Chica. He's currently CEO of Banco Agrario in Colombia. It's the only first-tier bank, right? As well? Well, you see how important putting together the Grupo Bicentenario is. Just to clarify all this, we need to have good coordination. Well, he has a degree from the Foreign Trade and Finance Plan and the Executive MBA from Sergio Arboleda University. He has a specialist degree in finance from Externado de Colombia University and will shortly receive his MBA from University of Northern Illinois. His career includes position as financial VP at ETB, president of La Previsora Trust, and CFO of the IGT International Game Technology Multinational. In addition to having been linked to Bancolombia and the Helm Bank, he has been a professor of corporate finance and financing. During his tenure at ETB, he led the technological transformation of the company and guaranteed the cheapest international public credit operation in the history of Colombia. Thank you, Hernando, for participating. And well, also here on this side is Rodrigo Penadillo, who's the Colombia office representative of CAF. He will be closing the panel. Thank you very much, Rodrigo. So let's start by Javier. How do you see the evolution and the role of public banking, public development banking in Colombia, especially promoting inclusion? Thank you, Ramiro. Greetings to co-panelists, friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Let me address your question perhaps by recalling that in Colombia we have a vast and rich tradition in development banking. There's different models in the world. Should there be a single bank or several banks? I don't think it matters which one you choose, but Colombia's tradition is important. Colombia's tradition is of having a Findeter, of having Bancoldex, of having Finagro, Financiera de Desarrollo Natural, previously FEN. It's internationally recognized that having different public banks for development, at least in Colombia, has worked very well, and it is a tradition that, in my opinion, one needs to respect. I believe that functionally we're well divided. If you look at our colleagues from over there to here, starting with Angela, Finagro is an institution that does it work very well, combined with the Banco Agrario led by Hernando Chica, my colleague and friend. FEN has done extraordinarily important work in relatively few years, and thus way you can go on and on saying that functionally we're okay, well divided. In the case of Bancoldex, we're a business development bank. We started supporting foreign trade, and if there's Mexican colleagues here, I like to use this example when given the chance. We were born as Bancomex and then became, along the way, as Bancofin. It's not that we have forgotten foreign trade, but the reality and the demands of our customers is greater support to SMEs, MSMEs. So functionally, I think we're well divided, and we have banks with different virtues. For instance, Banco Agrario has some good things or some positive things, like saying it's actually the only bank, I don't know if it's first tier, but it has deposits, current accounts, savings accounts. Other banks don't. In our funding, we're more similar to Findeter. In our funding, we live of the capitals market, and we receive very few state subsidies every year. And I don't say this sadly, I say it because it's a reality. There's subsidies that have to go to better places. At Bancoldex, and here's my colleagues from the Treasury Office, every day, every month, every year, we're funded in the capitals market, and that's okay. That's very good. That other banks have different supports, I also believe that's okay. So virtues, a rich history, we're well distributed. What do I believe to start dwelling into the discussion that we could do better in? We need to work more together. And we have discussed this throughout this morning. I think this will be mainstreaming during these 3 days. There's too many projects, too many needs, so that we address issues separately. So welcome the to the Bicentenario Group, Minister, because our calling is let's do more things. And I also have an example I always like to bring up is that seated here, we have FDN, we have IDB, and we have Bancoldex, where proudly we finance Puerto Antioquia. That's a project, a very large project with environmental and social challenges that are significant, but it's a transformational project, one that will allow banana growers in Urabá to directly ship their crops from their own port. And I think these are things that we need to do more. With Hernando, we're working on an agricultural leasing. They have the clients and the agricultural part, we have the funding. So, well, not to extend myself, I repeat, if we were missing is or lacking is more joint work, because we don't compete and we shouldn't be competing, but what we have to do is to go out and put together those balances to add more so that we can turn into a reality those projects that are needed. Minister Bonilla, in conclusion, he's called us to say, let's not leave any water systems without being built, no social works without being built. So those of us, the combined work of all of us that are here, well, we need to work very hard on this. So let me stop there for right now.
Thank you very much, Javier. Now I would like to hand the floor to Francisco. This is linked with infrastructure. Given your experience, Francisco, how these development banks can support transition towards sustainable goals and also facing the demands for more services. Can you hear me? Perfect, thank you. Well, thank you very much. And Bancoldex for the invitation, for gathering this panel. Thank you to my co-panelists and to those who are present today. Well, I do think that the question is regarding what can we do viable projects. And I do think it's to be able to structure these projects or to help that when they are financed, they can really have the characteristics that are necessary in order for a project to be successful in the future. When we talk about structuration, I think for us, I think it's very well known that a project very well structured where the time was there to solve the questions and face the problems. This is a project that's going to have a probability of being much more cost and timely efficient. A study of the IDB for Latin America, not for Colombia, has calculated a difference among a project very well structured and another one that's not structured. We can have a difference of 50% in the costs in the non-structured project. And this leads us to want to do the projects very well structured. What are the problems that we are facing? The two things that divide these structures are the most scarce aspects of the governors, the people, let's say time and resources. Time, because to structure needs time. We have to create teams, multidisciplinary teams. They have to work joint, and so this takes time. And the second would be the resources, because because these teams are costly and the time it takes is very long and it's very costly. So what can we do then to have the resources in order to finance the pre-investment, destructuring? This is very important. We in the FDN have created with the IDB a fund. It's a small fund for those projects, small projects, but also we have some resources from and these can be used for pre-investment. This is a very important use. Maybe my vision is that the most important use that these resources have is this one. And there are some projects that the government has clarity of those projects that it wants to develop. Since like the railroad projects, what we need to do is to execute this project and plan and organize efficiently, like the turtle, slowing down. But we have to take care. We had to advance and do it right. I do think the contribution that we can give as banks is that the projects can really be successful. Answering your question, that they are successful with the financing studied and also evaluating the risks and also in the structuring in order for through the structuration they can all be successful. Thank you very much, Francisco. I would like to hand the floor to Angela. Angela, given your experience in DNP, how can these public banks as Finagro can help with the governmental entities and the financial entities to have open access to credits and also to contribute to the environmental challenges that the country faces? Well, good morning to you all, and thank you very much for this invitation. A public banking as Finagro, we all have a lot of common, but also a lot of differences. Finagro is a development bank that has funding. It has funding that comes under certain financial conditions, very well planned, to finance the agricultural sector, which has a high risk, is a sector of high risk. This is the logic behind Finagro, and this is a logic in which we seek, as the President said, to have resources that really go to the field to have this financing. Well, how can we contribute? What happens is that Finagro, through this structure of funding it has to finance these processes that in general are high risk, and they require long-term and require a very deep knowledge of the activities that are required to invest in order to improve production, productivity, and do the innovations required to bring closer the agriculture. And also, maybe the reason behind this to have a higher inclusion when we talk about finance, many of these producers, that due to their activity and the guarantee conditions they have, in general, they are far away from the system. So this is the structure of Finagro as we see it, as we operate. So, in my opinion, on the work that we do, aligned with what was Francisco saying, to be able to finance these projects that have high risk and uncertainty, depending on the climate, water, everything impacts it, requires structure processes that are much more complex and a lot of knowledge. So this is why, and this is part of what we are trying to do in Finagro. Finagro, we cannot work alone. With Agrarian Bank and other financial institutions, we need to go hand in hand of these people, these persons who can do good projects for the field and that they really do good management. One of the aspects that we have developed, I'm not sure if you've heard about this, FinDeter is a first-tier bank too, because Finagro, with the resources it has of a funding structure that has a certain characteristic, is going to fund FinDeter with 100 million pesos. For what? To support these projects that are for the agriculture, that can be managed by the territorial entities. What does FINDETER can offer that FINAGRO doesn't have? That capacity of structuring, that's a win-win situation. It's a very strong coordination, and this is what we have always said. If we want that Colombia can be a world power, and definitely agriculture should be the pathway towards energy transition, we need to transform the agricultural sector. And we can obtain that with very good structured projects, and this is one of the partnerships we're doing in the Bicentenario group. Thank you very much for sharing your points of view. Excellent. What is the possibility of working with agriculture to have much more impact in the territory with very good projects? Yes, of course. And you also mentioned, it was mentioned by Francisco too. I would like to hand the floor to Juan Carlos, how public banking, development banking as FinDeter can collaborate with the local governments in order to promote the economy and in another way to expand and promote the infrastructure in the country. Well, can you hear me? Good morning. Thank you very much, Ramiro. Thank you very much, the IDB, CAF, and Bancoldex for the invitation. And thank you to my co-panelists, to all the participants here today. Thank you very much. It's important that you ask me that question because we are always aware of the territories, we have a vision of going to municipalities of categories 3, 4, 5, and 6, and the president nowadays has his own vision of arriving to the remote places, and that's what we're working on. When we were in Brazil, we were talking about the Amazon, and in the panel I was joining when I arrived to FinDeter in the areas we have visited, and let's say these points were disseminated in the center of the country, in the largest cities, and the remote areas that are called Colombia Profunda, Deep Colombia, they were not reaching those areas. So we were trying to go there, to those places with FinDeter. We have a lot of structural capacity, as the doctor already mentioned, and we had to take advantage of that. We have to take advantage of working together. Talk with Luz Maria Zapata. I said we had an event in November when we're going to invite the majority of the mayors. Francisco was also saying that the projects, the large projects, they have a delay, and they are delaying in structuration, in this process of structuring. It's a process, and we do have that capacity. We're going to offer very novelty products, very good products that the Superfinanciera gave us the support. So we are going to talk about patrimonio autónomo, autonomous heritage, where we have present the resources that the governor's office have and some entities. And we're talking about the Vías del Samán, Vías del Cigarra. These are very high impact works, and we can be able to finance and structure accordingly and also execute them. So in these types of projects, when we offer the mayor's office and the governors what we can bring, they can have royalties in this own heritage. This is where we have to do a coordination, all the entities of the Bicentenario Group, because all the regions throughout the country will need projects of this size and this type. So FinDeter will not have the capacity to do it alone. We have to do it jointly to help the regions. This is very important. We have to work jointly and continue offering teaching in this event in November. It's going to be here in November in Cartagena to show, and I invite you all to this event in order for you to show the new mayors and governors what does the entity do, our entity do, and how can we help them to strengthen the regions. So this is the most important thing for the development of our countries, our communities, and to close the gaps. This is the main objective. Thank you very much, Juan Carlos, for your insights. I would like to hand the floor to Armando. The question is regarding your experience in telecommunications, innovation, and how do you think that innovation can support businesses, banks like ours, to understand the impact they can have, and on the other hand, to transform these processes that we have of microcredits and that should be more cost efficient through technology. Thank you very much, Hernando. Good morning to you all, colleagues, dear panelists. Thank you very much, Javier, for your invitation, IDB, Bancoldex. Very important your question because we are in a transformation process of the Banco Agrario. Banco Agrario, we have digitalization office. We have a different cell with a technical team that is working, and we are working for more than 10 months on this. We will give news regarding digitalization processes, transformation processes. Remember that these processes are starting from the human talent. First is the human talent, processes, and innovations in technology. And obviously, that will lead us to a state of art to be aligned with other competitors in the private banking and our colleagues that also do a very important management in this sense in order to work what you have recently mentioned, be much more cost efficient. Why? Because we are focused in the Banco Agrario in the access, availability, to really close those gaps where access is not arriving. These formal credits are not arriving. So just to give you an example, in the agricultural sector, access to credit has more or less 20% of the it's around 9% participation, around 8 and 9. Only 20% have that access to formal credit. And also in the aspect of credit and visibilization of what is known as the popular economy. A popular economy includes also the informal economy, the SMEs, producers, in urban areas and remote areas that can have access, because one of the main difficulties that we are facing today in the financial sector and the first-tier banking is the costs of arriving to these populations, remote populations. We have to take advantage of the technology. We have to take advantage of these advances in order to arrive with a portfolio of products and services and have a good and easy access to this population, not only giving access to the financing, but also reducing some requirements. This is something that has led us to work in the reduction of paperwork requirements and also guarantees. So we help them with other entities of the Bicentenario Group as the Fondo Nacional de Garantías and the Fondo Agropecuario, which Angela leads. So we are adding this availability and making a leverage with this group to be able to arrive to that remote population that had not access before. This is part of what we're doing and focused in applying technology, investment. Nowadays, we have 100% of our offices are doing digitization. Around 80% of the offices have a digital payment method, our virtual wallet, and our virtual also current and savings account. As a final information, we are working in doing Wi-Fi in all the offices of the Banco Agrario de Colombia. So we are around 500 municipalities. To have a point of access of having free internet will enable us and the customers to get benefit, to have access to technology, to also have access to those financial products. Thank you very much, Hernando, for your contributions. Very important. And you were talking about access. I would like to hand the floor again to Javier, that has a lot of experience in financial entities. So, in a way, can these be replicated in Colombia to strengthen this financial inclusion? Thank you very much, Ramiro. Maybe before I answer your question, I would like to make reference regarding the previous question, the distinction between first-tier and second-tier banking. This is updated. It's not updated, I'm sorry, because if we see who are around us, let's say that in the case of Findetera and Bancoldex, what was second tier is a mix today. In Bancoldex, 15% of the portfolio is direct. So to talk about first tier and second tier is something from the past. And we have to talk about, again, is collaboration. Regarding your inclusion question, when we talk about inclusion, we have to talk about microcredits. First of all, we have to acknowledge that the microfinancing industry has done a lot of work. The progress in this century has been incredible. That at the end of the day, have the resources towards the businessmen, it has been extraordinary. It's still very small, this portfolio, regarding the normal portfolio system, but we do have to understand in the world of popular economy, we should segment into. We need subsidies if we want to grant credits in 12 installments, that the rates are below funding rates, then we need a subsidy. So this is okay if the subsidies exist. But meanwhile, we have to work on the solutions that do not depend on the subsidies, because we cannot expect just to receive the public resources and just be standing still. In Big Bang Coldex, we are working and we have ready designs for the popular economy, urban popular economy, because the rural is being met by Hernando and Angela. For the urban aspect, the designs are already in Bancoles. We are working hand in hand with the government for these, to really have these resources. And meanwhile, we have been working with an idea, different idea, much more technological idea, and I think very disruptive one. We have a platform that is called Neocredito. What did we do in that platform? We joined financial partners. We have more than 25. We are going to reach 30 partners that are going to compete for for the users. What they do is they grant a credit, and well, they analyze the credit, and that is gone to the allies, the partnerships, and they do these options with the users. What we have discovered with technology, transparency, and competence, we have lower rates. So we can, and we have proven some credits in which the rates are below 30% when the market is around 20 percentage points. So we are management around the installments in 24 and 40 months. So this is important in the financial system. To wrap up your question, it's very important to continue with the popular economy. In a way, it has a very feasible objectives, and we are working for these subsidies to arrive, and we can really continue to work on that. But we have, on the other hand, have to work on different solutions. It's important to have technology with us. We are in the third decade of this century, so the fintechs are very important. These are part of the ecosystem. So I do believe these are the two fronts that we have to attack, subsidy and non-subsidy fronts.
Thank you very much, Javier, and how important that he was talking about how using technology one can allow micro businessmen to have longer terms and smaller rates. The idea is to make profitable projects that perhaps were not. There's a point there, a turning point, and this is going to allow to increase investments in a sector of a very vulnerable population. So that's a very good thing. I know you're in a process of expanding these types of tools, and I know Colombia can contribute to other countries in Latin America, undoubtedly. Again, this is for Francisco. And my question is related to infrastructure. What's the contribution or the strategy to contribute by FDN to the Sustainable Development Goals? Well, a bit what FDN is doing is to understand what's happening in the world, knowing clearly that we need to bring resources to Colombia, that Colombia has to be part of the beneficiaries of that fair transition, and also being clear on the fact that the correct way of doing it is quantifying things, knowing which development goals we're going to work on, selecting the criteria, using methodologies and forms so that the work you do, people and your counterparts can understand specifically what we're doing on this. We're conducting a study with you with IDB to design methodologies to measure the goals that we're going to choose to improve in the projects, the SDGs, and to implement them both on the side of credit as well as on the structuring. On the side of credit, sometimes it's a larger challenge or a bigger challenge, because you know that if you put a condition on a project with which it was not structured, it means imposing higher costs, and this cost has to be benefited by a reduction in rates in the blended finance. So there's a challenge there to be worked. And another thing is to work from the process of structuring of the projects from step zero to include the SDGs and the SDGs that we want to measure and contribute to for climate change. That way, when the projects come out to the market, come out with the conditions, a bit what Annie did with the 4Gs, which was saying we have the IFC's criteria and IDB criteria as the environmental criteria, and these were standards that all projects had to meet. Here, obviously, it's not environmental, but also sustainability and gender inclusion. There's many more criteria to consider. But a bit coming back and to wrap up your questions, we know that we need to find concessional resources. We're also working with IDB for CIF. We just signed a credit with the AFD for almost $100 million at a very good rate for us that allows us to do blended finance directly. And we are being accredited by GCF in order to become, say, one of those agents for Colombia to bring the resources. Thank you, Francisco, for your answer regarding the SDGs. Something very important that paves the way for the PDBs. And now talking to Angela, how can one contribute from Finagro to food safety? Thank you very much. Perhaps one of the key things that we have been working on at our big bet is on financing a production of foodstuffs with credits. The first thing that was taken, and since we arrived, the first decision made was to be able to get all this funding to prioritize food production. But we're not going to stay just on the first chain or the first link. That's why I'm talking about foodstuff and not just primary production, because the bet of the government and that we need to achieve through public banking is to produce safe and healthy foodstuffs for everyone, like the zero hunger goal in the SDGs. And what does this imply? We need to be able to develop financing that includes the agro-industrialization process in Colombia, especially in foodstuffs. And what does this imply? That we need to think about what Javier said from the beginning in the terms, the funding structure of Finagro and in general agricultural credit is credit that has been geared to the short term, to an activity that doesn't go beyond 18 months or 2 years, and very much focused on working capital. If we want to increase foodstuff production and start with the first link bit to achieve an efficient, sustainable industry with good pricing, we need to develop a full package with development lines. And we've been working with the Ministry of Agriculture on some changes that are tremendously important for foodstuffs and with the Ministry of Industry. Something else that becomes important in this exercise is information. And as I mentioned, there's a risk. This is a risk activity. We all know that agriculture has this connotation that's a risky activity that has many variables we don't control. As Finagro, as public bank, one of the most important contributions it needs to make is to provide information that improves risk management, that allows knowing the type of productive structure and how these chains work. And simultaneously to providing this type of information, what we want in order to achieve greater agro-industrialization is to provide all these financial structures integrally with guarantees, with insurance, with long-term conditions, but that favor integration. This is a very important bit to integrating credit, which implies a transformation of credit in favorable financial conditions for all. What condition are we setting? What we've just said. The first thing is to act as an integrator. Any industry that wants to act as an integrator has to include the small ones, provide technical assistance, ensure good pricing, and have constant work in the territory. But in addition, that the benefits of this transformation process in the foodstuff industry must be transferred to all those participating in the chain. That is the big bet of ours to reach the zero hunger goal. It is part of our strategic plan, and with this, we're meeting the sectorial plan in this sense. Thank you very much, Angela. Great. Regarding food safety, that is wonderful in a country where poverty levels are so high, and it is a key topic to attend to. Juan Carlos, and now talking about territoriality, Colombia is very heterogeneous. What is the role you see of a bank like FinDeter in order to generate these capacities that dynamizes regional economies and also creates the conditions for sustainable development and long-term development? Well, I believe that FinDeter is the most appropriate vehicle for that. I do not want to lessen the importance of the other banks and the other agencies, but for instance, we have signed agreements with other agencies. With Envimas, for instance, we've signed an agreement to structure the highways and the roads in many regions of Colombia. And I hope that at the end of this month, we begin intervention in the Guajira region, which means going to Guajira. We've been there. Our technical vice president and his group were there. It meant visiting the community, understanding the community, working with the community. And I say comprehensive because we're going to be doing a little bit of everything. We're going to help improve hospital infrastructure, but also infrastructure for education, which are in poor conditions, but also highway infrastructure. And additionally, we are going to be working with the community. The community is going to be very important for us there. So we are going to do a model of what we call popular economy with the citizens. So we're going to give work to the community in La Guajira to the extent possible. We're also going to intervene the water reservoirs and dams in order to recover everything that has to do with water. So we call this an integral plan, and I hope it is successful and it shows the way for working in other regions. We are contributing a lot to this region as well as other regions in Colombia. Just recently, a credit line was approved for the generators of electricity that are going to help relieve some of the effects of the El Nino phenomenon and everything that has to do with the turning on of the thermoelectrical plants. So we're going to give them working capital for them to buy the fuel, but at a broader term than commercial banks, and with guarantees that were not being provided by commercial banks, and at a very low rate because we were approved by the Ministry of Finance. Also, another line was approved, and we're working on this with the Ministry of Housing for social housing for 1 billion Colombian pesos at a very favorable rate, also for working capital. We will shortly be announcing the conditions, but this billion Colombian pesos is going to reactivate employment in all regions of Colombia, because builders will surely have projects ready to start. So this is going to boost the economy very quickly in all the regions. I think that with these two lines, I'm making this announcement. I think we are going to help all the regions of the country. Thank you very much, Juan Carlos, for your comments. I'll come back to Orlando, and the question for you is, how do you see, or what are the challenges you see to expand credit, financial inclusion in rural communities? Thank you, Ramiro. Trust, that's the first thing. Secondly, communication, training, and accompaniment. This also makes it a bit more costly, having to accompany, at least in the beginning, because we've much discussed at colleague and banking levels on this possibility of reaching all corners and all segments of the population in terms of costs. So we say, well, the solution is just technology. Well, no. Presently, we've seen that the periods and curves of adoption of said technology take time. So in the beginning, you need to accompany, you need to provide assistance and advising in these processes. You have to provide technical assistance. And we've leveraged ourselves on different organizations. And generating trust, yes, it's important. We've seen auto exclusion. Several entities, USAID, Javeriana University, they found that in rural areas, 50% of the population does not want to be indebted because they don't trust. They believe they're going to lose their assets, that they're not going to meet the terms or the deadlines. So they don't make the decision of taking out a loan. And this restricts their productive capacity, because what we seek with the loan, granting of loans and all this inclusion, is to improve productivity and the well-being of the families in rural areas. So this trust, how do we intend to address this at the bank? We have been working with different associations. The community boards are important. We've signed agreements with close to 300 of these community boards where we train these people for them to also be the drivers of the products. Associations, trade associations, extension groups of these two. This is something we have been doing, but we are working harder on this. We're reaching new agreements with other associations, not just with the traditional trade associations. Also joint work with the chambers of commerce. In a couple of days, we are going to have the Confecámaras Congress here in Cartagena. We're going to be signing agreements with different chambers of commerce nationwide to promote entrepreneurship, work with youth, to accompany them in their productive and livelihood projects as well. So we're adding efforts amongst all in order to generate this trust. And also costs. Rates has been one of our greatest objectives. We've been saying it in recent months. We have been making decisions together with the Colombian governments and Finagro and Bancoldex of reducing interest rates in order to have better access to credit. So within all these processes, what we want to do is to come in with tools, generating trust, accompanying the people in the best conditions possible in order to support that production and that inclusion of the small producers, small growers. With an additional comment, in youth up to 28 years old, we don't request credit experience, we don't request guarantees. We also put them through the state, the different entities. It's having clear on a productive process and including renewal of labor and how deep-rooted these projects are in the rural areas and in agriculture. So it's access, training, and education, also working with the SENA. The SENA is another state agency that gives education, technical training, and we have signed an agreement with them. In all of these things, add efforts, we believe we're generating trust and with the goal of attaining or improving productivity in projects, we will have a green impact as well, which is another part of the development goals. Thank you very much. We're almost reaching the end of this panel. There's been no arguments or discussions. I have a general question for everyone. How do you see the possibility of establishing synergies between all of these entities to improve financial inclusion, allocate resources, and considering climate change, knowing that working together you can prevent voids or overlapping and thus improve the impact of investment by these PDBs? I will begin with Javier.
To answer your question, I would like to say the following. We cannot forget that we are financial institutions, so this is a very important calling to do a lot more, to lower the rates, and do a lot of things that have to be done. But we have to sustain the institutions. They have to be sustainable financially along the time. So we have to bring to the table, because we have all the processes, we know them all. Since we have this calling, we have to really take care of our institutions, and they also have to be very healthy. I'm not sure if it's a synergy, but we can do a corporate governance. This is very important because we represent banks, the corporate governance, a very strong one, sound one, that can support us as independent entities is vital, because we talk about sustainability over time that has a governance where technical aspects is more important, and also to do things very well. A very good structure that my colleagues already mentioned. This is very important. This sense, coming from the Grupo Bicentenario, we will have initiatives to strengthen the corporate governance, to always increase the standards. The best corporate governance, I'm not sure if it's a synergy, but it's the one in which we have to be involved. Because if we want to ask a lot of things to these institutions, we have to make sure that they are sustainable over time. For me, the most important thing as a financial institution is the corporate governance. Thank you very much, Javier. Francisco, regarding synergies? There's a lot of synergies that we have been working on jointly. I think that the PDN has a lot to give the group. Its structural capacity, structuration capacity in small or large projects in which we have to work throughout time, and also in financing large projects. As Javier already mentioned, financing of Puerto Antioquia was a very good example of synergy, in the sense that we have a risk analysis that's different from the other entities of the Grupo Bicentenario. So if we see a way to support in our risk analysis, and also for them to offer resources to certain projects with the Banco Agrario, with Hernando, we are starting to work on how can we structure large projects in the agricultural sector in which there is no, well, the bank doesn't have any knowledge and that capacity. With Bancoldex, we're also working On the energy sector, with Findeter, we are working in highways, and we're working in a transition that's very interesting, which is that the fact they are very good executing the projects and doing the technical support in the municipalities. So to seek those spaces, and we can deliver them all the possibilities to do the management. This is very interesting, and this is part of what we are working on and talking. We still have a lot to talk about because there's always something new, because we are getting together to talk about synergies and how we can help each other. In each debate, there are new things to be done. So thank you very much. Angela? Apart from these two my colleagues have mentioned, I do agree with them. Finagro requires this, and this is something that is fundamental. Being Finagro one of the oldest banks, and we have certain structures that we need to modernize and to take advantage of this situation that we have as a group and the initiative of the Ministry of Finance through this participation group. Additionally, I think that another mechanism regarding synergies is in the implementation process of public policies. In what sense? Generally, we have a trend to work in sectors, agricultural, environmental, and I think as a group, we should have the same action line regarding policies and to be able to work as an intersectorial. That's why I talked about food industry. Evidently, if what we are seeking is an objective as zero hunger, it's very important that the financing of Finagro can really go towards the rural areas and remote areas. So it's not something that we can do it alone. We can do that with Bancoldex. It's on a synergy point of view of public policies. On the other hand, and may also maybe some connectivities that we don't have today, is regarding the risk management. We have public insurers that have a very important information for those financial sector that we should work hand in hand. Agricultural sector through the agricultural ministry has very important resources that support all these markets in order for them to work. And I do think that the role of the public insurance is critical. I know that Previsora is working in that line, but I do think this is a very important synergy. And finally, I do think that information, has already been mentioned, the information is a collaboration scenario among the group to improve risk management, and also the guarantees. As Hernando said, Finagro manages the agricultural fund, which is a public fund, is a public instrument for the financial inclusion. We have the Fondo Nacional de Garantías. These are very powerful tools for those who don't have really guarantees, can really approach the sector. But we have to work jointly because we can also complement each other. We can guarantee the first small producer, but we have to work jointly. Thank you so much, Angela. Juan Carlos, just a question for you regarding synergies. This really helped us to advance in this process, to work jointly. We have worked. We do have synergies with Francisco. We are working in a very important highway project, San Finagro. We have an agreement with them that basically we are going to identify small projects in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tier municipalities to impact the region. So we're going to help a lot of these regions. But to generate more synergy, I would like to invite you to our event. It's going to be in November 14 and 16, because we're going to have more than 200 mayors, and we'd like to invite a lot more, but we don't have the capacity. So we will be able to identify regional impact projects in which the governors and the mayors need to finance and need to structure. So for this, that's why we're here. to help the regions. So my invitation is to really go to this event. I'm pretty sure we're going to see a lot of projects in which we can do a synergy with Banco Agrario together to do the synergy. At the end of the day, can help all the mayors and the governors of the region who is going to really close the gaps in our country. Thank you very much, Juan Carlos. Finally, I would like to hand the floor to Hernando. Thank you very much, Ramiro. What we have is a capacity of supporting each other, complementing each other, not only here in the Grupo Bicentenario, but also from the point of view of the industry and financial sector. We do not have we want to arrive to there to close the gaps and this blockage of access of a lot of the population in Colombia that hasn't had access to financial credit. So there's no competitors here, and not either here in the Grupo Bicentenario. But Confinagro, we place 94% of the operations in and 85% of the amount of these operations, and we continue growing for the SMEs. And we are growing around 20% in a very high rates, and we're doing efforts to lower these rates. With the FDN, we do not have, let's say, a robust evaluation of investment banking. We can complement that, the productive projects in which it requires productive chains, in which we are, for example, working and presenting, talking about milk pulverizers, for example, with the guarantee funds, obviously. We are part of this system in order to give access. With Javier, we're working on Neocredito, new credit, which is a very interesting tool where we're going to segment the markets, and in those SMEs markets, we will leverage this between both banks. With Findecter, we can work on financial closings and different projects, so we are complementing each other. What we are seeking, because we felt that in the country with this disacceleration, is to seek measures to irrigate resources in the best way towards the economy to continue advancing. Thank you very much, Hernando. Final question for the Vice Minister, Diego, regarding our Grupo Bicentenario. In the current state of the group, the lessons learned, and where's the group going to? Currently, there is a board of directors in the group. Let's say it's a temporary board where we have the staff, technical staff, ministers and prime ministers, and Ministry of Finance. Lessons learned is important to have this financial holding to strengthen the synergies. When you mentioned that question, because there's a lot of experience, and the group enables us to do frequent meetings with the presidents, and we meet each 6 weeks to talk about sustainable inclusion, financial inclusion, and this is very important. Also, we knew that there are a lot of actors. We've seen a lot of actors with which we can work. To have this holding really can enable a lot of people to work jointly. Where is the group going to? So the idea behind this group is to really have like a president of a board of directors that at the end of the day having different shared centers. This, I didn't show it in my presentation, but at the end, when we have this idea of holding, we have service centers that are shared and will strengthen that synergies and offer joint products. So at the end of the day, this is going to be the objective. Development bank aligned with the objectives of the national government, as Javier already mentioned, as the popular economy, the small producer, aligned with these decentralization of the territorial finances. That is one of the main ideas of this government. So this is going to be an anchorage in which these government proposals can really have a place. Thank you very much. How about your concept regarding the group? I would like to thank each one of you for your participation. Very important participation, insights. As Grupo Bicentenario, as development banks, which are key to dynamize our economy in this country. So thank you very much, Javier, for this event. Has been wonderful. Hand of applause for him. Thank you very much, and also for Bancoldex, ITB, FD. I would like to hand the floor to Rodrigo Pinalillo for his closing remarks. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ramiro, Vice Minister, Group Bicentenario Bancoldex, especially. Thank you very much for being here. We are working jointly with the IDB. The most important thing is not to forget why we're here during these 3 days. Apart from what has been already mentioned, that essentially the objective is 15% of the Sustainable Development Goals are under risk. Only 50%, 15% are advancing satisfactorily. What's happening with the rest? In this sense, we can say that effectively what happens in poverty or emissions reduction in the developing countries are reducing poverty. What we see is that emissions are increasing 50%. So this is the reality of Latin America. This is the reality of our region. This is where we have to focus. The Sustainable Development Goals is saying that projecting the role of the women in we need 146 years to meet those SDGs. Can you imagine 146? So we have advanced access to digitalization, energy. In that sense, what is the role that we have jointly in the development banks? First of all, in the sense regarding the government, private sector, first of all, to align strategies. This is the things that we are doing in multilateral banking in Colombia and the World Bank also. And to align this development plan in the strategy of multilateral banking to the national development plan, this means that we immediately have to work with the Bicentenario Group. And specifically, I would like to recall Francisco's words, structuration. Here we have a lot of ideas that need to be structured, but they have to be very well structured. And for this, we need the resources, the multilateral banking too. We have the resource for restoration, but they're not enough. If we want to go to Bogotá and Santa Marta, if we want the port of Buenaventura, if we want the Tumaco port, if they are all very structured, very well structured, we need to do a joint effort that is very big, jointly with the World Bank, the IDB, the CAF. That way, we can say that we're going to bring the SDG goals, and we are going to advance in that sense, and to also create financial vehicles. We have CAFAM, several years ago that leveraged a lot of dollars for the highways. We're going to implement that in renewable energy. So we can say that, how about successful experiences? I'm going to go to my country, and I can say that the Chilean government called the multilateral banks and said, I'm going to create a bank of 0.33 of the GDP. Not much, but can you imagine how much is going to leverage 0.3 to support all the SMEs in the industry? And it's starting next year. Why can we do this here? We can do it the CAF alone? No. IDB alone? No. And another thing, an example as FINDETER, a very important thing that is in development plan, the Article 233 that Ministro Bonilla calls CAF. If we are going to be able to execute projects, FINDETER is going to give us, and we're going to grant in local currency. And we can say, what's the difference if you could do with the commercial bank? No, we're going to the municipalities, 3, 4, 5, 6, those who do not have resources. The difference is commercial banking and us is that we do have money to support this structuration. and we do have the professionals. So we have to do it jointly with the World Bank IDB to really manage that article CAF. Go to Findeter, and we hope that this happens with the local banks, or to bring. Not wait until 2030. There are projects for more than $2 billion, 18 highways, CAF 8, and we are talking with the Ministry of Finance and also Findeter to create an autonomous vehicle that enables us to advance this holding. It's very important for competitiveness and productivity, but also to contribute to the compliance of the SDGs from the perspective of Colombia. So there's a lot of experience, opportunities, there are quite a lot. The most important thing is that today's conversation, we can continue with this conversation. And with Ramiro, we have a very strong relationship. So the idea is to do things jointly, to be able to be together. In Colombia, that's the idea. Thank you so much and congratulations.
para que tengan su almuerzo. Buenas tardes. Buenas tardes. Me dirijo hacia ustedes con todo el respeto. Ahora, más luego pueden acercarse al primer piso, al salón de claustro, para que puedan tener su almuerzo, ¿ok?
Jessica, bájale a todos los audífonos y bájalo, bájalo. Sí, bájalo, no, bájalo, bájalo.
No, o espíchale los botoncitos amarillos.
No, bájalo para probarle los...
No, ya los tiene calibrados.
No, es para ver cuáles son, pues. Sí, hay que subirle, hay que bajarle.
No, por eso, ciérralos todos y deja. Ejemplo, este es el canal 2.
carry wishes in the air. Why am I so empty? Why am I so alone? Blowing bubble gums with friends. Blowing bubble gums with them. Bubble power is my gun. Blowing bubbles so they reach the sun. But maybe they'll pop in front of my eyes. Yeah, maybe they will not realize that in my head hidden wishes I sent to the sky. But Used to love face with me. Shame to even let it show, but I can't let it go. All this time, you're on my mind. I feel so tied to you. And though I try, I'm so hard to prove. I'm never over you. Shame to even let you see. Used to love face in me. Shame to even let it show that I can't let it go. Ooh.